Well, thank you everyone for joining us on this separation support webinar. We really appreciate everyone tuning in. So we're going to go over a lot of different topics today, ranging from selling your family home to mortgages and refinancing, and then the lawyer side of things. So we'll get into the agenda here. We're just going to briefly introduce ourselves. We'll go over the main objective of today's webinar and the main objective of working with our team. Chloe's then going to talk about some mortgages, and then we're going to go into selling the family home. Chloe's then going to talk about some spousal buyout options, and then we're going to have Duca from Brunga Law look at all of the legal considerations to be made. So I'm Michelle and this is Jesse. We're with Team Apex Real Estate. We have a real estate team here in Dufferin County, and we are based out of Orangeville, and we're with Keller Williams. We've been in the business now for 8 years, and we service Peel, Dufferin, Halton, Simcoe, and Gray.
That's right. I've got nothing to add to that. So Chloe, tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name's Chloe Colella. I'm a mortgage broker with Dominion Lending Centers. I've been in the business for about 10 years now. I help a wide range of people with refinancing, renewals, spousal buyouts, separations, and so forth, everything mortgage related. And I work all over Ontario, so GTA and surrounding areas.
Love it. Duca?
Okay, so my name is Duca Muscillo, and I'm a lawyer. I practice at Brunga Law, and we're located in Etobicoke. My main areas of practice are real estate and corporate law. So everything to do with real estate is closing purchases, sales, refinances, commercial properties, residential, everything to do with that. And just to echo Michelle's opening is welcome everybody, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Well, let's get into it. So the first and foremost here, obviously, the title is Separation Solutions. Not an easy subject, especially when we're involving real estate. So the number one thing in terms of what we're trying to do here is obviously create some solutions for you guys, and it's being in alignment with both of you individually, making sure that the family is at the forefront. It can be a messy situation, but if we can make the real estate side of the family portfolio a little bit easier on everybody, so you can separate, go your own way, and live your life, that's our number one objective here.
Okay. So I just wanted to touch base on some important things to be aware of and to consider in terms of when you're getting mortgage financing, when you're having a separation. So the most important part of this is understanding your options and assessing your individual financial situations. That's the key here, because that's going to guide you and let you know what it is that you guys can do individually. So your mortgage affordability, figuring out what exactly your maximum purchase price is. Now that you're a single income, potentially you're going to have a cosigner. You might have the child care benefit that you can add to income. If there's spousal support or child support, there's a lot of different things that we can add to income so that somebody can actually make a purchase on their own when they don't have the dual incomes. Also, talking about subprime lending, where if you have 20% down, then there's an option for you potentially that can allow you to get into the market until your situation, is a little bit better, or gets you into a situation where you can then move to an A lender. So there's a lot of different options that we can look through and figure out what's best for you, depending on what it is you guys are trying to do for the family. So also we have to talk about managing existing mortgages. So if you have a matrimonial home and you guys are not trying to do a spousal buyout, but you want to sell, we figure out that that information for you, and obviously know what you're going to have from that profit to determine what your down payment's going to be. There's also open communication. Like obviously here it's it's a time where it's a little emotional, and I am here to help you with everything and make you understand everything clearly, know what it is you can and can't do from the mortgage financing standpoint. And then obviously there's something that's really important that a lot of people don't think is important, but your separation agreement. This is a very important part of the process that you need to have ironed out and completed so that you can actually proceed with purchasing a home or doing the spousal buyout.
Okay, beautiful. So with respects to the real estate side, obviously this is where Michelle and I come in. There's two objectives here. So number one is going to be the spousal buyout. Now, family home, it's important. There's obviously going to be some disruption to the family life, but that home is a safe haven. So the first thing that we always try to position is going to be a spousal buyout. So there is as limited disruption to this process as possible. A little bit of background with respects to just myself. I do come from a separated family. I was 20 years old when it happened, so wasn't young, but nonetheless old enough to really understand the grasp of what was going on. We had a relatively decent family real estate portfolio that, for all things being considered, a lot of capital was tied up in legal fighting and all of that. So our objective, whenever we're dealing with these types of situations, is to iron it out and make it as easy as possible. So we position a spousal buyout as number one, and that's where we incorporate people like Chloe, as well as Duca, to figure out how this can be done if it is an option. Because again, if we can limit disruption to the family life, it's better on everybody. Now, in this situation where this isn't an option, the numbers aren't jiving, or you just don't want any part of the family home, where you just want to both put it in the rearview mirror and move on, that's where we can start to entertain option number two, which is selling of the home.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, so this is the spousal buyout, again, which we talked about. I can't touch on it. We connect you guys with people who do know what they're talking about, Chloe. So again, you can, echo maybe some things that you said in the first slide, but just touching base on what this would look like in a spousal buyout situation.
Yeah, so definitely. So now, obviously, having a spousal, making the spousal buyout option work, we have to make sure that obviously we can debt service the mortgage. There's a value that has to come in that everybody has to agree on, and an amount that has to be paid to the opposite spouse. Now, the cool thing about a spousal buyout is there's a program that allows you to treat it as opposed to it being a refinance where the loan to value is 80%. You can actually treat it as a purchase where you could have a loan to value of 95%. So it's really cool because that's actually allowing people, if they can debt service, to actually pull more money out of the equity, and allows them to buy out the other spouse and be able to give them more money if need be, right? So it's definitely a really good option. Also allows them to take some cushion out too, if they ever wanted to have that. So just because they're going to have this mortgage on their own as a single income, with a spousal buyout as well, like depending on what your situation is, there's potential to add to your income, like I had said before. So, if you're getting the childcare benefit, we can add that to income. If you're getting spousal support or child support, we can also add that to income. If anybody has a cosigner, temporarily, we could add them onto the title and the application so that you can actually, proceed and move forward. And then obviously this can be a temporary solution where we can remove them off at renewal, or, like with Duca, legal fee, I believe, to just remove somebody off the deed. Correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, like there's a bunch of different things that we can do in terms of a spousal buyout and making sure that somebody can qualify.
Yeah, so long story short, there's a lot of options if the number one thing is to, let's say, keep the home, keep the kids in school. So typically, again, that's where we try to lead. So another thing to mention here with respects to just even last year, a third of our transactions were marriage breakdowns or separations. So this is a regular occurring thing. So life happens. It is what it is. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's obviously good just to know what your options may be. So if the spousal buyout is not viable, then we go down the selling route. Now, before I get into what it looks like on the sales side of things, it is worth mentioning in our experience, even last year, what happens typically, okay, the marriage is ended, need to move on. You'll have one party who does not want to leave the home, okay? And they're entertaining the fact of selling it because they're going on to the market. However, what they're doing in this situation is the list price is going to be extremely high, okay? Which from the real estate side of it, there's going to be very minimal showings. You're so far above market value, nobody's even really going to entertain an offer. So you're just kind of delaying the inevitable where it's not going to sell. You're trying to position the property where, hey, we're trying to do everything we can to sell it, but really at the end of the day, the list price is not working. So before you delay everything, be very transparent about it. Speak to a mortgage broker and a lawyer. Hey, what needs to happen in order to keep this? Because I don't want to dispose of the asset. Look down that option. Now, when it comes to selling the home, okay, our goal from a real estate standpoint is to sell your home for top dollar in the shortest amount of time. No different if you guys were trading up in the marketplace. We don't treat the transaction like it's any different. We're trying to move this, not leave any money on the table, and get you guys so you can move on to the next chapter of your life. We are very mindful, okay, and appreciative of what it is that you're going through, okay, whether this is an amicable situation or, Michelle, go ahead with that other word.
Contentious.
Contentious. I wasn't going to butcher it in front of all you guys, especially with it being recorded, but we've dealt with both, okay? Amicable situation, you guys are getting along just fine, no problem. We can put all the communication into one group chat, one email thread, so everybody is in the know and they know exactly what's going on. Now, in the contentious situation, again, we've handled those as well, okay? Whether there's a mediator that's involved or we're going through the lawyers, there is not a breakdown in communication. A lot of times what happens in our situation, okay, is we're taking the same message and we're copying it and pasting it and changing the names. So there's no disconnect. There's not favorable treatment from one side to the next, okay?
Yeah, it's important to know that we do have a fiduciary duty to handle with care, and we do work for the both of you. So lines of communication are never crossed or always clear in these situations.
Yeah. And I think to even add to that, even in respect to like mortgages and getting pre-approved, I mean, everybody can understand, everybody knows each other's information, and it's good so that there's no secrecy, right? Like we're trying to do what's best for both of them. Everybody knows what the house is worth. You know, we know what the profit's going to be for each. And then obviously at that point in time, we can keep things confidential because if that's what's wanted. But, you know, like we want to make sure that this is a smooth process, you know, making sure that you feel that we're here for you, which is what we do best. And that's just helping you get rid of, you know, feeling uncomfortable and just moving forward and with the process for yourself individually.
Perfect. Then moving into the actual selling process. Okay. So the number one step here, again, is circling back. It's the valuation. Okay. It's determining what the market is willing to pay for your home. Now, again, like I mentioned before, we do see these often where one party wants to come in at, let's say 1.5. Okay. But market value is in a 1.35 to 1.3. And then the other side wants to list it at 1.2 because, hey, we want to move it quickly. Well, obviously we need to get some common ground, establish a value in terms of where to go to the market so that we can start the process, and weighing the pros and cons of both listing lower and listing higher and how that's going to play out with the marketplace.
And I think that at the end of the day, when you are marketing or pricing the property, you want to price it at market value. Everyone in these situations, you just want to move on and get on with the next chapter of your life. So by marketing it according to the current pricing is definitely the way to go, because pricing it too high at the end of the day just prolongs the process and is kind of hurting everyone in the process.
Yeah, you're adding weeks, possibly even months to the process. A little bit more agony because maybe the hatred is not going so much towards your spouse, but also to the realtors and the market for whatever it may be. On to number 2.
So preparing the property for sale. We do not do anything differently from if you guys were trading up in the market or if you guys are getting a separation. The property is still prepared in the exact same way. And preparation is what is going to make the sale of your property succeed by getting top value and selling it the quickest.
Along with accessibility,
Mhm.
right? Like real estate, there's feelings towards it, there's emotions. Pictures and virtual tours are fantastic, but people can actually go in and see your house, feel it, touch it. That's what's going to get them to want to submit an offer. So obviously being able to do that is crucial as well. The next step, obviously, marketing the property. This is a big one, and we get this question more often than not when we're meeting with people that are having a marriage breakdown. Is the market going to know that we're separating? Okay, no. If your realtor is marketing the property as a separation or making it a tire fire, well, you should probably meet with somebody differently, because you don't want to be negotiating from a position of weakness. And obviously, highlighting separation or whatever that might be can cause lowball offers, with you will. And with respects to marketing the property, sometimes there's particular couples that, hey, I have my agent and the other one has their agent, and they try to do a collaboration, and let's say those agents each want their sign in the ground. Well, if I work for Keller Williams and Michelle's working for a competitor and we got two signs out there, usually it's telling the market, hey, there's probably something going on here, because I couldn't even agree to who is going to list the property. So just make sure you're working with somebody who's keeping you at the forefront and is in line with your core values.
I was just gonna say, like, that's a really key point as to why it's very beneficial to work with you two, because you're a team. And what do you guys do in the instance where a husband and wife want separate representation? What do you tell them?
Well, at the end of the day, what we do is we try to meet with both, right? So for example, we're no different than any property. We're going to meet with the sellers and do a listing presentation to talk about, hey, where's the market? Here's what we can do to sell your home. In the case where it's not amicable, we do the same presentation twice, right? We want to meet with both of them. We want to make sure that they're feeling comfortable with us. But in the instance where, let's say the husband wants us and the wife wants somebody different, at the end, we certainly position, well, maybe it's best for both of you to interview a third party, okay, where there is no ties to one another side. Yeah. And we've been in situations where we've suggested that, because it's going to make the process easier for everybody. And that's the goal here, is to dispose of the asset so you can move on. Negotiating offers, it's same as I talked about with respects to communication along the process. Nothing is different here. Okay, so offers come in, same message is delivered to both sides. If it's amicable, hey, it's in a group chat, an email, a call, whatever that might be. But if it's not, we have communication with both sides so that there is no broken telephone. And then finally, closing of the sale. This is where I'm going to loop in Duca, because they play quite a big role in the real estate transaction to begin with, but more so especially with marriage breakdowns, because again, there's a little bit more vested interest in terms of where things may be going. So Duca, you've got the mic.
All right, thanks, Jesse. Good job, guys. I just want to start with, keeping the objective in mind is the family home. And with regards to the law, the matrimonial home is treated completely different than any other assets within a marriage. So for married couples, the matrimonial home is any real property ordinarily occupied by a couple during their marriage, whether it is owned directly by one or both spouses or through a corporation. Most people think it's just, the one home that you spend most of your time in the single property. But a family home or a matrimonial home can be, their cottage, their summer or winter cottage, can be, a house down in Florida that is used solely by the family most of the time. Okay, it's not rented out, it's not used for investment. So it's important to keep at the forefront of our minds during this discussion that, you know, dealing with the matrimonial home. During the marriage, neither spouse can either sell or mortgage the property without the other's consent. So it's very important to, when it comes down to either the buyout, as we were mentioning as the first process, or the second process of selling the asset or the property altogether, it's very important that, you know, they are aligned. Often what we see in you know, my experience has been some marriages breakdowns are not amicable, and you know, we have to deal with a little bit of a emotional hostile situation. You guys touched on it earlier in terms of you know, conflict of interest, so to speak. You have to represent both parties' interests, and we are the same. In the event that, you know, we're representing both and both consent to the joint retainer, nothing can be hidden from any party. It has to be, you know, open dialogue, everybody involved. So moving on from that, the second part of that is the actual sale. And as you guys are both aware, and most people are aware, the lawyer in selling or closing any real estate transaction, purchase or sale, is the last stop. So you've gone through your mortgage process and, you know, the buyout option. If that works, then it comes to, you know, the lawyer to finalize the deal, maybe take one spouse off and direct funds as per you know, the separation agreement to buy out the ex-spouse. The one of the spouses will sign and direct funds as per their wishes. The second part is if you sell the property completely, you've gone through Michelle and Jesse, they've listed, they found a buyer, and now your closing date is coming up. The process is like any other real estate closing transaction. You know, you retain me or any lawyer. They go through the process of opening the file, and you work towards your closing date. And that process is, you know, similar to every other real estate closing. You have to sign the documents. If it's amicable, you meet all at once. Everybody signs the documents, the closing documents, and on closing, money comes into our trust account, our firm's trust account, and directed as per either a separation agreement or absent a separation agreement. We will have a direction signed to say, hey, the proceeds are split 50-50, or if there's any other agreement between the parties that it would be dispersed such and such after legal fees are paid, mortgages paid off, and real estate commissions. Okay. The last thing I wanted to kind of talk about is we're one of the last jurisdictions, or the only jurisdictions in, you know, most of the world that has a common law spouse you know, law, so to speak. And the common law spouses, the family home is treated a little bit different. It doesn't have such special rights as the matrimonial as home, as in, you know, a legally married couple. So the thought or the justification behind that is that the family home is treated like any other asset and belongs to the person who purchased it or is who is on title, or to both partners if they purchased it together, and that's how it works. There's no property rights, so to speak, for the partner who didn't contribute to the purchase or is not on title. So that's a misconception that we see all the time, because common law spouses do have a lot of rights, but the property is not considered the matrimonial home and is treated a little different. Okay. And I think that's all I wanted to touch on. I mean, if there's any questions, I'm happy to discuss more. But yeah, just the process of the selling, the separation agreement is very important in terms of how the funds get dispersed. And typically that's done way before it gets to the real estate solicitor and closing the transaction.
I see. No, that's good. No, I appreciate that, Duca. That's some good insight.
The common law thing is actually really good to know.
It's news to me.
Yeah,
So
I didn't know that either. I thought that's really good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a common misconception. It's a question that I get asked a lot. I've been living with, this person for X amount of years. And now, our relationship is breaking down. Do I have, rights to the house? Typically, technically, no, not typically. Technically, you do not. But what's important is you don't have no rights. It would then have to come to litigation in courts, and the onus would be on the partner who's not on title to prove that they've contributed a significant amount towards the house, and the bills and the mortgage and whatnot, to claim an interest there. And there is, two main points to put out. You could claim constructive trust or unjust enrichment are the two ones that mainly common law spouses. But that's getting into a little bit more deeper end of family law and whatnot. And we don't need to touch into that stuff.
So Duca, just a quick question in regards to what you're just saying. Is that an instance where, let's just say, the male purchased this home, but or the female, but the opposite partner is contributing 50% of this monthly mortgage amount. So they're not entitled only if they can prove that they've actually.
Right. And my suggestion would be is maybe, the male is going on title only because he can get, approved for the mortgage, right? And he's the only one, but there is a contribution made by the partner or the person who's living with them. What legally, what I would suggest is, get something written down on paper. There's cohabitation agreements for common law spouses that are very popular. Even as simple as an acknowledgement signed by both parties saying, hey, look, I'm going on title. It's 100% in my name, but you have contributed X amount. Something as little as that will go a long way in showing that your contribution was made.
And I think that's important to know, just to protect. It's kind of like a prenup, right? Like you're protecting yourself. Right. It's not like you're trying to set yourself up for failure, but it's just knowing this information until you're actually legally married, if that's what happens, just to make sure that you're prepared properly.
Yeah. And I mean, going through the whole litigation part and getting that combative is not what everyone loves to do, right?
And probably costly, right?
Very, very costly and takes a long time.
Right.
Interesting. That's all good. Now we do have a few questions that have come in.
So this one's directed to Duca. So how can we address any potential disputes or disagreements during the home selling process?
Well, that's a great question, and we just kind of spoke on it. The best way is to pre-plan. When everything is going well in a relationship, nobody really wants to document things. But the best way to avoid dispute and just avoid any miscommunication is to document, cohabitation agreement for the common law spouses, or, for the matrimonial home, it doesn't really matter because the Family Law Act will kick in, and the equalization of the assets and the family home, matrimonial home will come into play and kind of sort that out. If it's not amicable, most of the time, it is sorted out. Even if family law lawyers are engaged, most people avoid the whole court aspect of it. And it gets settled out. But the best way is to just document things, and even if it's as little as keeping receipts of payments and a paper trail of what has been paid and who's paying what, and that's the best way, really.
Okay, that's a good question. Anything else?
Yeah. So one just came for Chloe. So if I am planning to buy out my spouse, what documents will I need to provide when applying for the mortgage?
So that is a good question. It depends on what we're utilizing for income and what we're trying to prove. So I can just give a general idea. So typically, if you're salaried or hourly, we would always get a letter of employment showing your guaranteed hours per week. T4s if you've been there for over 2 years, because if you get overtime, that's noted on the T4s. If you're self-employed, we need T1 generals, a notice of assessments, business license, articles of incorporation, pay stubs. So it's like anything income related. If you're using the childcare benefit, we need proof of what that monthly amount is, which you can get on the CRA online portal, or if you keep the docs that you get once a year. Obviously, you need your separation agreement, because the 3 things that a lender wants to know from that agreement is what's happening with the matrimonial home. Is there child support received or being paid? And is there any spousal support being paid or received? So those are the 3 things that any lender wants to know. And that's why a separation agreement is super important when you're going through a divorce or a separation and trying to purchase a home or doing a spousal buyout. And I mean, other odds and ends, depending on what they're doing. If there's a cosigner, obviously we need to know that number 1, is the cosigner even a good fit based on their debts, if they have a mortgage, if they have, a decent amount of income that will help support the file, right? So just depends, it's case by case, but for the most part, it's some of those items.
Interesting.
And then there was an extension to that question as well. When it comes to buying out your spouse in terms of the previous mortgage, what fees are taken into consideration for that, such as breaking the mortgage?
So I've dealt with actually quite a few spousal buyouts or complete separations and properties, matrimonial home being sold. I've seen amicable ones where they are split 50-50. And that's coming all from the profit of the sale. And then after all the debts have been paid out, typically by the lawyer, then they would share that profit and split it evenly. I've had some where they didn't like that and they weren't amicable about it. And so everybody was just responsible for paying their own specific debts, I guess, that there wasn't only in their names. So I think it's just a conversation to have with people. And I think that's why it's really important sometimes even to be able to work with both people, because there's no sort of like guessing with all the money and the debts, and like we can see everything as a whole in terms of the financing, and we can know what is something that you can and can't do, right? All the options are pretty black and white in terms of when I have a credit check for each person, I know all their income, I know what the profit is. It's just a lot of a smoother process because there's no guessing, and I know exactly what's happening and what everybody has, right? So in terms of like if there's debts, that's shared usually, I guess. And then in terms of legal fees, selling the property, I believe it's usually split. For the most part, that's the way I've seen it, but I'm sure it can go any which way depending on what each party wants to do. Duca, do you have anything to add on that?
One thing to note is you're right. It's usually split 50-50, the burden of the costs. Absent, a separation agreement, that's typically how it goes. The separation agreement can dictate, one party paying more than the other. The main thing I wanted to point out that's extra is when buying out a spouse or not, there is no land transfer tax applicable. What it is, it's a zero consideration for love and affection, so it negates any land transfer tax that would need to be paid.
That's important.
Okay, so even on title that reflects like a nominal fee, like a dollar.
Yeah, like a $1 or $2. And you make the statement that it's to the CRA that or the municipal and provincial land transfer tax departments that it's being in accordance with the separation agreement, and it's between spouses.
Oh, okay.
Beautiful. Anything else comment?
One thing
Yeah.
I wanted to just cap off with is, from the legal aspect, is that everybody's situation is completely different. So what I do for clients is, I encourage them to speak with the realtor, speak with the mortgage brokers before making any major decisions, and know all the facts, and family law lawyers, and it's a very wide area of law and can get pretty complex. So, speak with someone, know everybody's situation is completely different. Know all the facts and then pick the best route that's best for your family.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
that's a really good point.
And then there was just one more, Jess, you can take this one. So when you're determining list price of the home, if they are going through selling the home, how is that? How do you determine that?
How do you determine the list
Yeah.
price with respect to separation?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, like I mentioned in our portion here, it's all going to be relative to the market, right? So what is the market doing? Just because you're separating doesn't mean that the strategy should change. How we address this question typically when we're meeting with, whether it's a marriage breakdown or just even, like we said before, trading up in the market, we're going to look at months of inventory. That's going to be the number one driver as to what's happening in the marketplace. Let's look back, prior to February of 2022, we were operating with less than 1 month of inventory. So that's where we were seeing, a list price of $899 launched on a Wednesday, looking at offers on Tuesday, and then the posted sold price, is 1.2, 1.3. Well, there's a shortage of inventory. There's a demand in the market. So a listing strategy of $899, you're going to get a lot of people through the door. That's what we call in our space a marketing price. In a more balanced market, which we're in right now, there's more transparency. Okay. So, hey, here's market value. Let's bake in a little bit of extra room to negotiate. Things are selling between 97, 98% of asking. So this is a strategy that's going to work. So if it's a really bad situation and you guys really just want to try to offload this, regardless of, let's say, the months of inventory, yeah, look at what's going to be put you at the top of the list. Any market, micro market's going to have a list of properties that are available, whether it's 25, 10, 5. Hey, you want to move the property quickly? Make sure that on that list of properties, your property's 1, 2, or 3, because that's going to be what's going to move. But if you guys want to try to net out more money in a market, let's say like today, it may take a little bit longer, but you're going to want to have a list price that works for both of you, that's in alignment with the market. So long-winded answer, it's all going to be contingent on what's happening in the marketplace and what both parties can agree to. So I hope that answered it.
Yeah,
I don't know
I
if
think
did
so.
or not, but
Yeah.
I gave it the call to try.
I have a question actually, because I've seen this firsthand with a bunch of clients, and I'm sure you both have too. In regards to one of the parties always, like the one that's either staying in the house and wanting a lesser value, and then if they're selling, then they want a higher value. Like, how are you guys navigating that? Because I tend to try to have conversations with them as well in regards to that, because it's a tricky kind of situation to be in, but everybody always wants what's best for them sometimes. And so how do you navigate that?
Well, that's a very good question. And for those that are tuning in with these type of concerns, where if you are somebody that wants to stay in the house, we get this quite often. We'll meet with one, hey, I want to list this at $999 and I want to sell it. And then we'll meet with their spouse and he says, I don't want to sell this house. I don't want to move. I will only go to the market at 1.4. If somebody wants to give me 1.4, then I'll sell. But market value is, let's split the difference, 1.15, 1.2. Okay. We take this conversation. We say, hey, we understand that your party wants to sell. You don't want to move. So let's connect you with a lawyer. Let's connect you with a mortgage broker, and let's look at the spousal buyout, because again, it's just going to be a long process. Both parties are going to be very annoyed with it. Mm-hmm. And if there can't be an agreement or the spousal buyout doesn't work, well, then we have to, and it's never us. It's never, here's my opinion. Jesse, this is what I think. No, here's what the market is telling us. And just like you, black and white, the numbers tell a pretty direct story.
And I think it's also important to note that if there is some disagreements there and one party who is potentially living in the house and they're don't want to sell it or don't want to sell it for a specific price, and they're refusing showings and being really difficult with that. Situations can turn a little bit nasty, and when you get to those situations, it does then go to family law, and there's certain directions that have to be followed at that point.
Well, and on that note, there's Duca was talking about track record. Well, denied appointments, there's paper trail of that, right? So these are things that we talk about as well, right? Like obviously one party is not doing their part to try and sell the home. So these are all things that are outside of our scope, but you know, guys like Duca, I'm certain that they probably see it more often than what we do.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, if there's no agreement in price, one party can force the sale of the home. However, it just can't go about, you know, hiring you, signing a listing agreement and sign. They then have to engage family law lawyers, and you know, go through the procedures of that, which gets a little bit more complex. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the key here too is like, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying if that process can be avoided.
Yeah, for the family, right? Like you, with all that comes, you know, children, if there's children, you know, stress watching that happen, stress between both parties, like no one wants that. And I think the key here is just to make sure that we're mitigating everything and putting everybody's feelings, you know, or considering everybody's feelings, but still trying to do the best job we can to make everybody happy so that everybody can move on.
Yeah, and we'll kind of leave it on this note unless there's any questions. But I think the number one consideration here is, and I'm not a therapist or anything from that standpoint, but at some point in your relationship, you guys did care for one another, right? So you kind of got to remind yourself of that, hey, you know, there were feelings here. If there are kids involved, there are more people involved than yourself. And if you can make this process, which it may be the final chapter in your relationship, easier down the line when things, you know, like the kids are in sports or graduating or whatever it might be, it'll be a lot easier to be in somebody's space than going 9 rounds over a separation or disposing of an asset. Yeah. Because things can be done in this process where you can't look back and fix it. But if you can have some common ground, and this is where I think all of us try to play a big role in making it simple, looking ahead to the future, it could be a lot easier on everybody.
Yeah, I agree.
But
yeah, I think that wraps it up for the questions. So thank you so much for everyone tuning in. We hope you guys learned a lot from this. I know I learned a bunch more too, which is always great. We'll share all of our contact information in the next slide. We recorded this, so we will send it out to everyone to rewatch it. Or if you ever do have any questions, again, all of our contact information is here. So reach out to us anytime if we didn't cover anything that you needed.
Yeah, and we'll send out an email with a summary of it as well. Just have like a summary cheat sheet of just the most important information. So that you guys have that, so you can reach out to any of us if you have any specific questions.
And be sure to smash that like button and hit subscribe.
Thanks so much, Duca, for joining us as well.
No problem. Thanks for having me, guys.
Hey guys, thank you.
All right.
Thank you.